Ever wondered what would happen if you shot a gun in space? Would the bullet go on forever? Or would the vacuum of space cause something bizarre? Stick around as we explore the thrilling, mind-boggling physics of firing a gun in the infinite expanse of the universe. By the end, you'll be surprised by the answers. Let's dive in. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. We've all seen it in movies, guns firing in space. But have you ever thought about what would really happen if you pulled the trigger beyond Earth's atmosphere? In this video, we're diving deep into what firing a gun in space would look like. You'll want to watch till the end because you won't believe some of these surprising outcomes. Part 1. The physics of guns in space. Before we dive into what would happen if you shoot a gun in space, let's take a quick look at some basic physics concepts that will help us understand the difference between shooting on Earth and in space. On Earth, when you fire a bullet, it travels through the air. But here's the thing. As it moves, it faces air resistance. That's drag, the friction caused by air molecules pushing against the bullet, which slows it down. And of course, gravity pulls the bullet down toward the ground, causing it to eventually fall. But space? Well, space is a whole other beast. There's no air. That means no resistance. The bullet doesn't slow down because there are no air molecules to create drag. Also, gravity's influence is minimal once you're far enough from a planet, so the bullet won't fall back to the ground the way it does on Earth. The result? A very different experience than what we're used to when firing a gun. So, what does this mean for the bullet once it's shot into space? Part 2. The key factors. Lack of atmosphere. Now let's talk about sound. On Earth, when you fire a gun, you hear that iconic bang, right? But in space, that bang would be completely absent. Why? Because there's no air in space. Without air, there's nothing for sound waves to travel through. So you wouldn't hear the shot at all. No air molecules, no sound. It's like firing a gun in complete silence. It would be eerily quiet. The recoil. Next, let's talk about recoil. On Earth, when you pull the trigger, the recoil is absorbed by your body or the ground beneath your feet. But in space, there's no ground to stop you from moving. So, when you fire the gun, the equal and opposite reaction from Newton's third law will push you backward. The result? You could get sent spinning or floating away. Imagine trying to stabilize yourself in zero gravity while firing a gun. It might not be as easy as you think. You could end up drifting off into space if you're not careful. And without gravity to pull you back down, your movement could continue for a long time. Part 3. What about the bullet? Bullet's trajectory. So, what happens to the bullet once it leaves the barrel? In space, things get pretty interesting. Without air resistance to slow it down, the bullet would continue traveling in a straight line forever, unless something like an asteroid, comet, or the gravitational pull of a nearby planet interferes. That's right. The bullet could potentially keep going for eternity. It's like a cosmic road trip with no stop signs. If nothing gets in its way, the bullet will just keep moving across the universe, endlessly. And here's where it gets even crazier. Space is so vast, and the chance of the bullet actually hitting something is incredibly small. The universe is mostly empty space, so it could be floating out there, traveling for millions of years before it ever comes close to another object. No muzzle flash. Now, let's talk about the muzzle flash. On Earth, when you fire a gun, you see that bright, fiery flash coming from the barrel. But in space, there's no oxygen. And without oxygen, combustion, the chemical reaction that creates the flash, can't happen. So, when you fire a gun in space, you wouldn't see any muzzle flash. It's a much quieter, subtler shot, with just the sound of the gun firing inside your helmet, if you had one. Basically, that iconic burst of light you expect when a gun is fired on Earth wouldn't be there in space, making it a much less dramatic scene than you'd imagine from all the movies. Part 4. Would the gun even fire? Now here's a cool fact. While space lacks oxygen, the gunpowder in bullets contains its own oxidizer. That means, yes, a gun would still fire even in the vacuum of space. You might be thinking, how is that possible? Wouldn't the lack of oxygen prevent the gun from firing? Well, the key is that the gunpowder used in most ammunition already contains both a fuel and an oxidizer, chemicals that allow the gunpowder to ignite and burn without needing air. The oxygen needed for combustion is already built right into the bullet itself. When the trigger is pulled, the firing pin strikes the primer at the base of the bullet, igniting the gunpowder. This starts a chemical reaction that rapidly releases gas and pressure, propelling the bullet forward at high speed. So, even without the oxygen in the air, the bullet can still be fired, just like it would be here on Earth. Part 5. Real-life space gun experiments. Soviet Union's attempt. You might be surprised to learn that firing weapons in space isn't just a theoretical idea. In fact, back in the 1970s, the Soviet Union actually conducted an experiment with weapons in space. They mounted a cannon on the Salyut 3 space station and fired it during a mission. That's right, a real weapon was fired in space. Now, while this wasn't the kind of blazing gun scenario you might imagine from action movies, it was a very real and purposeful test. The Soviet Union used the Recoil R-23 cannon as part of a military experiment to see how firing a weapon in space would behave, both in terms of the weapon's mechanics and its performance in zero gravity and a vacuum. They fired it successfully, proving that, indeed, weapons can be discharged in space. So guns in space? They've already been done once before, but the experiment was more about testing the functionality of the weapon in space than actually using it for combat purposes. Still, it's fascinating to think that our theoretical exploration of space guns has already had some real-world testing. Part 6. So what happens to the bullet? Collisions and cosmic radiation. So, let's say the bullet doesn't just keep going forever without anything happening. There's always a possibility that it could collide with something in space. But here's the kicker. Space is really empty. In fact, about 99.99999999999% of the universe is empty space. This means that even though the bullet could travel through space for millions of years, it's highly unlikely that it would actually hit anything. The bullet could keep going for an incredibly long time before it even gets close to a comet, asteroid, or any other object. But let's assume that something does eventually collide with the bullet. Well, that collision could alter the bullet's trajectory or even break it apart. However, considering how much of space is devoid of objects, the probability of a collision is astronomically low. And then there's cosmic radiation. Over time, this invisible radiation from stars and other cosmic sources would bombard the bullet, potentially degrading its surface. However, this would take ages. We're talking thousands or even millions of years. So, while cosmic radiation could gradually affect the bullet, it's something that would happen over an unfathomable amount of time. Part 7. The coolest part, the bullet's journey. Here's the fascinating part. If you were to fire a gun in space, that bullet could literally be on a journey for eternity. Think about it. Once that bullet is fired, it would continue on its trajectory forever. No gravity to pull it down, no air resistance to slow it down. It's like setting something free into the endless expanse of the universe. Imagine firing a bullet into the cosmos, knowing that it could travel across stars, pass through nebulae, and eventually reach distant galaxies. Now, that's a mind-blowing thought. The bullet would be like a tiny messenger, floating out there in the vastness of space. Who knows? Maybe one day, thousands or even millions of years from now, it could reach a far-off star system, a galaxy completely unknown to us. The idea of something you fire today still journeying across the universe in the far future is pretty surreal, isn't it? While firing a gun in space sounds like a thrilling idea, the reality is much calmer. Without atmosphere, gravity, or oxygen, things like sound, bullet drop, and muzzle flash don't happen. But the bullet's journey would go on indefinitely, making it the ultimate space traveler. Thanks for sticking with us through this mind-blowing journey into space. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more scientific adventures, and let us know in the comments. Would you ever want to fire a gun in space? Until next time, keep questioning the universe around you.